Hey, hi friends, welcome to today's video. So in the last video we created our new Swift package, that is our network layer. Now today we are going to start developing our network module. Okay, now let's start doing it one by one. So we have to write our code inside our sources. Then let's go here and first create the class for all our error scenario. Okay, so let's say that I call this as API error. Okay, now we have a error uh, thing, right? So here what we are going to do that we're going to create a public now. So let's call it API error, and this will confirm to error. Okay, now it can have multiple cases. For example, what if the URL is not correct, or if we get some sort of decoding error. Okay, or we can call it as some unknown error, where we will take associated enum, where we can pass some message to the end user. Okay, so this is, again, we can have here more cases. If you see in any real-time project, we will have more, maybe 6 7 cases more, based on the status code, the different type of error message that you are going to receive from your server. Okay, now the next thing is that when you think of any network module, that means that you are going to have some sort of method like a get request or a post request. So let's create the other class called http method. Okay, and here again this will be a public, and this will be of type string. This is confirmed to string. Okay, and here I can have multiple cases. For example, get, post, we can have put, delete, all those things. I'm just keeping it for time being get and post, because in our uh, example or the application that we are going to build, I think we are going to just use get and post, but you can have here multiple different method type as well. Okay, and then based on its value, or we can just have for example, I can just write it directly here, that get, basically get, and here you can write it post. Okay, you can have more cases. For example, I can have put. Okay, so now my http method is created. Okay, now the second thing is that when you think of any let's say request, so what are all the basic components that you think of? Like one thing will be your base URL, let's say for example http/google.com, and then you will be having multiple endpoint, right? If you're using REST APIs, even if you're using Graph API, you will have some endpoints. Okay, so you have one base URL, then you have endpoint, or you can call it as path. So in some places you will see that we call it as a path, or as an endpoint. And then you have method, like whether it's a get type or post type. Then you will have headers, like where we passed all the necessary header. For example, if you are using some sort of authorization, then you pass your authentication token and any other thing to uniquely identify your request. Okay, and then you have parameters, request parameters. Now request parameters can have a normal body. For example, just a normal we create a dictionary and then we send it to inside a body, like for example for post call, or you can have a URL encoding. Okay, so that's the basic things that we see inside what you call a request body. Okay, so let's create here a new file and call this as here let's try to write all the property that commonly a request is going to have. So one is your base URL. Okay, like in most of the project you will have a single base URL, but you can have multiple base URL as well. Okay, then the next thing we can have is endpoint or path, you can say, and this we can have, again I get that this should not be enum, this should be basically a protocol. Then method, right? What is the type of method that we are going to have, and that we already created, that is http method. Okay, next is a request is going to have some headers, okay, in the form of a dictionary. And then we're going to have a parameters for passing some sort of data. Okay, and we have two type of thing, either we have a body or we have in URL encoding. Okay, so parameters, we have not yet created this, so let's now go and create this bg request parameter. Okay, now here inside this we can create as a enum. Okay, which will have two case, either it can have a body where we are passing something in a dictionary format. Okay, so string, and we can have any value here, and the other case we can have it in URL. So case URL, and in generally in URL we don't pass for key, we'll have just a string as a value. So this is now ready. So we have created our uh, error part, we have created the protocol. I think this error should now go away, and we have created this parameters. Now the next thing is to create a builder class which will actually build your request. Okay, so let's go ahead and call this as bg request builder. Okay, and this is going to be a again a public protocol, and here this will accept the request protocol that we have created. So here we can write init, that's one way of doing that. Okay, or let just a base URL which is going to be a type URL, and a endpoint. Now we can create few function here to set these values, like let's say that if the user want to set path, user want to set headers and parameters. So what we can do, we can create function, let's say that set and method. Okay, and this will be type of http method which is going to return the type of your protocol. Okay, and here we can have a discardable result, so that we don't want the callee function to give any sort of warning when they don't want to use it. Okay, so let's create for all the uh, parameters that we have. So we have which will build your request. So we have build, and this will basically throws a URL request. So this method will finally build your URL request, which will you will be passing to your URL session class for all the type of your request call, whether it is a get or post or anything else. Okay. Now finally we have to write our builder class. Do one thing, instead of calling this as builder, I'll call this just as bg request, and okay. So now if you see, it is asking us to implement everything. Do we really need this init method? I think we're going to use this init method where we'll initialize with base URL and path, and then we can set all the parameters. So what I'm going to do is that go back here and just let have one init method, that is just init with base URL and the path. Okay. So now this will go away from here. Okay. So now we have init method. So what is going to happen, that whenever this gets called, we will be setting our variables, right? So let's do one thing, let's go back to our protocol, copy all this thing, and let's define this in your builder class. Okay. You initialize this class, you will have the base URL. So what I can do, I can set the base URL right from here, and then we can set the path also from here. Okay. Then when you call the method, what you can do, you can set the method, and return the self. Okay. And this self will be small self because you will be returning the instance of your request builder. Okay. The main important function, that is the build. So here what you need to do, we need to build our request thing. Okay. So first thing what you need the base URL, right? So let's say that where URL equals to base URL. Okay. I think in most of the cases endpoint will be also a kind of mandatory, because you will always have endpoints. So I'll just remove this as optional and let it remove from here as well. Okay. And anywhere else we need to remove it. This is fine. And here we also have path, so I'm just removing this. Okay. So this also, let's remove this. So now this is fine. Okay. Now we have the base URL. So the final URL will be base URL plus your endpoint, right? So we can write base URL dot uh, appending path component. Okay. And we can have path as path. Okay. So this makes our final URL. Okay. Now from this URL, what we are going to do, we have to form our URL request. I will call URL request equals to and then you will be passing your URL. URL is just URL. Then you can, it's not mandatory, you can pass some cache policy also, and you can pass some timeout also. Like let's say that if you didn't get a response within a particular time, then your request will fail. Okay, now in this URL request we have to set all the values that you are getting. Okay, so the first thing is that this have a method, and this we can pass as method dot raw value. So then the http method we have the raw value. So if let's say that the method comes as get, it will pass as this capital Get. Okay, now after this we have to do two things, like set all the headers. Okay, so for that what we can do, we can if you see here URL request dot all http header field, and this we can assign to our headers. If you see, this is also is your dictionary. Okay, so this is fine. I assigned my header, I assigned my method type, URL is done. The last thing remains is your body. Okay, now for body we have taken two cases, right? One is for normal JSON body, and one for when you have URL encoding. So let's do one thing. Let's define two function here. And call it as configure body data. Okay, and what this is going to do is we already have the parameters here. Okay, so it will check if let parameters equals to parameters. So if it has the data, then only you need to set it, right? So instead of calling this as configure body data, we'll call it as setup data first, setup body. Okay, and what basically we have to do, we have to set up this body to the same URL request, right? To the same thing we have to set up. So this request has to come as a parameter. That means here we need to take this as a parameter now, and the same object has to be returned back. Now if you might have heard about a parameter called in out operator. If you have to modify the same object parameter or same function parameter, then we take in out, so it behaves like a reference thing, like when you call it, you pass the address, not the actual value. So this I'm going to take as in out parameter, and this is going to be a URL request. Okay, that's it. Okay, and this we can call from setup body, and this we can pass URL request. Okay, so once we complete this function, it will complete this URL request. Okay, now here it should have the parameter, if switch parameter. Okay, and it has two cases, one is your body, one is your URL, and based on that we need to call two different methods. So the first function will be private function setup request body, and the second one we can have just copy and paste this setup request URL body. Okay, so now we have to call these two things, and what do you need to pass? You need to again pass the same thing as a request, and obviously we also need this parameter side. So the first argument will be the parameters. So for the body, if you remember, we took this as a string any type. I'll show you again. So for body it was string any, and for the URL type it was string colon string. So string colon any, and the second parameter will be for your request. So for request, and this is again going to be in out type, because we have to set on the same object. Okay, so this is done. let me copy it here also, and this I'll change it to string. Okay, now based on the cases, you are going to call either the setup body request parameter. I can take it from here, let body param, and request is your URL request, and this I can call it as URL param, and again call setup request, and this goes for your URL request. Okay, so now the error should go away. Why it is giving you error? Okay, this has to be optional, and this also has to be optional. Okay, so now the error goes away. Now we have to write this part. Okay, so here what we need to do, again write a simple if let all thing, if let parameters equals to parameters, then we have to convert the parameter to data and then just pass it. So what we can write, let data equals to try JSON serialization dot data with JSON object, and what is the object here? That is your parameters. Okay, and we don't have any options here, so options can be empty. Okay, and after this we'll have the HTTP body set to data. Okay, now for the URL part, basically we have to append this as a query parameter. Okay, so again this line is going to be same, and here what we have to do is that first we have to take out the URL. So let URL equals to request dot URL is actually a mandatory parameter. So what we can do, we can club multiple iflet. So this is the first thing, this is the second thing. The third thing, that we have to take out the component. So URL components equals to and here we have to pass the URL that we just took it out, and this we can pass it as true. Okay, now once we have our component ready, so what we have to do, we have to set the query item here. So that is query item, and if you see, we have to form the object of query item. So this is not basically your normal dictionary. Okay, so what we can do, we can iterate into our parameters, that is this one. So parameter dot map. So once you iterate here, what it will give, it will give you basically key and value. And if you see here, once we form the object, for example here if I write URL query item, we need to pass two things. One is a name and the other one is value. So name we can pass as key and value will be your value. Okay, so from your dictionary, as dictionary is having key and value both, so key will goes to your name and then value will goes to the value of that URL query item. Okay, and then we have to do the simple thing is that the request that we are getting it here, we have to set this URL. Why we are again changing the URL? Because this URL now have the query parameters. Okay, so URL components dot URL. This class is also done. It is still giving some error. Let's see what error we are getting. It is asking us to have base URL that we already have, Okay, this is because we change it to no plain string. So what we need to do is that go back again to bg request and remove this optional here. Okay, so whenever we initialize, we will have both path and the base URL. So this basically completes our request builder. Now we should test it, right? Like now we have written it, how to use it. That should be the part of your example project, and that for that reason only we have created this. That okay, now we are able to form this, but how to use it? Now, right now, if you see, we created this BZ network manager, and it is right now empty because we are not using this class. We created whole new class here. Okay, so for testing it, let's um, write a method here. Let's say that function make request. Okay, now I'm going to use. So we are going to use this URL for testing purpose, and if you see that this returns you user id title body in an array of object. Okay, you can see it in raw format. And this is one website which, if you have not seen, this is a very good website where you post your JSON and then it will create the required structures for you. And just paste it here. Let's confirm it to Codable protocol. Okay, and here is my URL. Now if you see here in this URL, up to typecode.com is your base URL and slash post is your endpoint or path. Okay, I'll just paste it down here. Now what I'm going to do, that we have to first create our base URL. Okay, from basically from a string, right? So this one, and this we can pass till your com. Okay, else we'll just return it. Now after this, the next thing that we can do is form our builder. So let builder equals to, we have bg request builder. So we have to pass base URL, that is this one, and then we have to pass path. So path in this case is slash posts. Okay, now we can set the required property, like for example builder dot set headers, uh, set method type, like this method type is get, so I can set this at get. Is giving me warning that result of call, so maybe I missed discardable result somewhere. So let's go to our bg request and copy the discardable result. So this is fine, and this we are missing a return statement, that is return URL request. Okay, we are still having some error, that is it is calling telling that some properties are not initialized, because if you see that this method, this is not initialized. So what we can do, let's say that we can give some default value to the method, that is get. So this solves the error. Now let's come back to our content view, and now this warning should actually go. Okay, so now one thing which I have not yet written, so we have created a class for builder where we are returning the request, but we have not yet created the class which will actually call the URL session. Yeah, this existing class, that is bg network. Okay, so here a protocol and call this as network protocol. Okay, and This we can call it as BG network to make it more sync with the name. Let's say that if it doesn't create any naming conflict, that we'll see. And inside this we'll have a function called make request, okay, which is confirmed to codable. Now I'm taking it as a generic because for all type of request and response body, our method or our function should work basically, right? And this will take a parameter called builder, which is our pg request builder. Okay, then the next is decoding type, or we can call it simply type, and this is going to be t dot type, that which type of request is going to response is going to decode. Okay, and this throws again we are going to write this is complete combine framework, so let's import combine here. So any publisher, so if someone who wants to write without combine, so I already have made a video where I didn't use combine long back. I'll just have that link in the comment section. So t, and then it is going to return you the error, right? So let's return the error, and this error is going to be the API error that we have created. Okay, now it's giving some error. So it's telling that any publisher is available only in iOS 13 plus, and what is the minimum version that we are supporting. So if you see this package, okay, yeah, that's a new thing actually which we should see. So if you see, when you create a project, we have the minimum target, right? So here if you see in the project, this the minimum deployment target is 17, right? But when you create a package, we have not given any minimum deployment target, so by default it doesn't get created. So if you want to have a minimum deployment target for your package, so package deployment target is different than your uh, app deployment target. So here what we can do, we can write uh, platforms, okay, and you see the supported platforms. So first thing is that which platforms do you want to support. So for example, when I'm building this, I want to support let's say iOS, tvOS, macOS. So .ios, and then you see the supported version. So let's, it was giving error for 13, so I'm just writing it 13. That all you can choose based on what type of component that you are using and what is the minimum support version. Let's say that for the Mac OS you can have anything 13, 14, 15, you can keep it for 15, and then you have again for okay. Now if you go back here, this errors should go away because now we are defining our minimum version, okay, and you can see that the error went away, right? Now let's confirm this busy network to busy network protocol. So once you confirm this, then it will ask you to implement this function, right? Now this is an important function because this is where we are going to make our API call. So T is decodable. I don't think we require this line. Let me remove this and see if it is still giving any error. Now the first line will be here. Okay, everything has to be written inside a do catch block. So do catch, and then it comes. So the first line is that you have to form our uh, request. So you'll get your builder object. So what we can write, try builder dot build, and if you see this bg request builder have this function build this one. Okay, it will give you the URL request. Now let me remove this. The next thing is that now we have to use our URL session. So URL session dot shared dot. Now if you want to go with normal without combine, then you have to use this method. If you have to use combine, then we have to go for data task publisher. Okay, so if you see, this takes basically a URL, or you can pass a URL request. This is our request, and then we have to subscribe on. You see that where, in which thread we want to subscribe. So let's do this on background thread. We'll see that if that creates any problem. So dispatch queue, why it is not auto populating, then global, and we can take this as background. Okay, now after that what we'll get the data. So try map, and here what we'll get the output of this operation. And what output we'll get data and response, right? Two output you'll get. So why it is giving error, let's see this first. Cannot find dispatch queue in scope. Let's import foundation, maybe then it's able to find it. Okay, yeah. Now here you can check for your status code. Now in general 200 is the status code for success, but again it's like it's not a hard and fast rule. Sometimes you can get success for other status code based on how your backend is configuring. So let's, I'm taking somewhere between 200 to 299. That is a standard, that if you get between that, it's a success thing. So st, then it's fine. Otherwise throw a error, and what error it will throw. So we have API error dot we can say unknown error, uh, bad response code. Okay, else if we have the data, then return the data. Okay, so it's giving you some error, cannot convert return expression type publisher dot try map dispatch queue data return type any publisher t API error. Here the return type we have to give that, okay, we are expecting the return type as data for this particular block. Okay, okay, so after this also it's throwing some return type. Okay, let's do one thing. Let's first complete this block, maybe get the data. The next thing that we have to do is perform the decoding. So t dot self, and then decoder we can pass as just one decoder. Okay, and once we have to also map for our error scenario, that what if we get any error. So dot map error, delete this, and here it will have a error block which will get you the API error. And now based on that we can write some cases, that if error is let's say for example decoding error, then return API error dot decoding error, else we can write that if error, if let error equals to error as our API error. In that case we can return error, And in the else case, what we can do, we can return the API error dot unknown error. It's something like unknown error occurred. Okay, so this completes our this request body, but still we have some data. Okay, and after this we have to write erase to any publish. Okay, so catch, I'm just removing it here, and this I'm just throwing a hard coded error dot, let's say URL error. Okay, so it is telling me that instance method type decoder requires T to confirm to decodable. Okay, so we are missing this codable here. Okay, any other error, this will be through, because finally it is throwing. Okay, so this complete our busy network module, and I've given this public init so that this object can be created from outside of this uh, module. Okay, now come back here to our content view where we were writing the example, and let me create the object of our busy network. Okay, and let's use again a do catch block. So here what we can do is let response equals to try, I'll call it as network dot why it is not giving make request, am I missing something? Okay, this should be also public. Once we create this, now we should be able to call make request. Now we already have the builder class, so builder object, sorry, and decodable is going to be welcome element, and this is basically the array. Okay, so this dot self. Okay, and once we create this, what we have to do is response dot sync, right? So sync, then receive completion. So what we are going to do is take this as completion object, and here we'll see we are getting the object that basically we want. Okay, can assign this or type or write this value. Okay, so let me just write a print statement here with what value we are getting. Okay, in the catch we can have again this, and right now I'll again just print it out. Okay, let's call this value, and in the sync we have to basically write a switch case for our completion, and it will have one thing as finished. Okay, finished means it's just telling you that okay, your API call has finished, so I'll just call it as finished. Anyway, I'm not getting any value here, and the second case is your failure just now use, and here you'll get the error. So print finished, and again copy this, call it error, and let's print out this error. Okay, error, right? Okay, one thing it's still giving is that the result of sync. So whenever you use sync, you have to actually use a cancelable object where you can store this. So let's import combine and define a cancelable object here, and then what we can do, where you are making this request, then at the end of we can write dot stored in and then cancelables. So this should give, okay, it's telling that it cannot be passed. Okay, Okay, now we don't have this code, so here instead of this I'm just going to call make request. Okay, everything looks fine, and if everything is good, then we should get the model output in our print statement, right? And we have one more error, that is make request, and this is okay because this is a struct. We are trying to modify this value, so let's take this as at the rate state. Okay, so it is still throwing errors. What I okay, because we have made this function as mutating, and now the build got succeeded, and you can see in the output we are getting the proper object, and then it's even also getting the finished. Okay, so let me do one more thing for testing the error scenario. What we can do, we can pass some uh, wrong endpoint, let's say this, and you can see that we got a proper error message. Okay, so that way how we can build a generic network library. So that's all for today's video. I know that this is a little longer video, but hope you have understood a lot of concepts from here. Thanks for watching. Thank you. In the next video we are going to use this module into our main project. Thanks for watching.